Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnie Luks here at the Crossroads, and another interesting forum, and in particular, the health, our health, and we've got an extra special guest from Tasmania across in the forum, and that's Dr. Peter Baratosy. I'll just go through who Peter Baratosy is. He's an officiating Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery at the Gore Street Clinic in Tasmania, and he's a Fellow of the Australasian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine. His contribution to his discipline is that he's produced several books. In particular, the one we want to talk about today is Gut Feelings, of which he's doing a revised and expanded second edition. Welcome, Dr. Peter Baratosy.
Good morning.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And Beata Luks from Adelaide. Beata is a mum and a wife, and she's keenly interested in health and vitality, and it's a subject that she is certainly endeared towards, and I know that for a fact because I see the garden that she tends and the food that she prepares. Welcome, Beata Luks.
Good morning.
No worries. Now, Peter, your book, The Gut Feelings, the revised and expanded edition. We've got your original book here, and I've been going through that, and there's a lot of discussion on the internet nowadays about microbiome and gut and the flora and bacteria in the gut and the colon. And I wondered if you could just give us an understanding of what you see in this area, please.
Where do we start? We cannot live without our gut bacteria. Humans are really a container vessel for bacteria in your gut. We have a symbiotic relationship between the two. Not only do we give food to the bacteria in our gut, the gut helps to break down and metabolize some of it. The gut bacteria is important for our health because there is an interaction between the gut bacteria, our colons, and that sends messages to the brain and the immune system. So really, it's an integral part of our being.
Mm-hmm.
There is more bacterial DNA in our body than human DNA. We have trillions of bacteria in our gut, but they have to be the right type. Our health is dependent on, let's just for simplicity call it the normal good bacteria. They try to keep out the bad bacteria, but modern life really isn't good for our good bacteria with antibiotics, and I suppose antibiotics are good in a life-death situation, but they have been overused, and they certainly do affect bacteria in our guts. And where there is gut disease or gut unhealth, shall we call it, then we're not healthy.
It seems to be that it's essentially the force holding our well-being together is in this area of the gut and digestion. Yeah.
Well, it's not just digestion; it's behaviour. It's things like allergies and autism and a lot of other diseases which you wouldn't even think the gut has a role in. It actually does. They've been doing experiments with germ-free mice or rats where they actually breed a rat or a mouse without any gut bacteria at all, and then they introduce the microbiome of diseased people, and then the mouse develops that disease. There's one Parkinson's even. You wouldn't think that the gut would be related to Parkinson's, but they get germ-free mice. They put the microbiome of Parkinson's into the mouse, and the mouse develops Parkinson's-like symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, it's getting more and more complicated.
It's more and more integrated, isn't it? And that's our relationship.
Exactly.
Our relationship with the health of of our
Mm.
colon, our digestive system.
Yeah.
Beata,
Well,
what are some of the things that you do in order to optimize your family's health?
Oh, um, well, since the discovery of this microbiome and its importance and the fact that everyone's talking about it, um, we've been introducing spore bacteria, for example,
Hmm.
in our smoothies, and yeah, trying to use a lot of freshly grown vegetables, um, good fish with lots of omega-3,
Hmm.
that kind of thing,
Hmm.
and of course distressing as
Mm.
much as we can.
Are fermented foods an integral part of your family's diet?
Oh yes, yes they are. We do a lot of fermenting, but also buy some things that we can't possibly make all the time.
Hmm.
Yes, we
Excellent.
do.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Dr. Baratosy, the relationship between our gut and the modern varieties of grain, um, is this detrimental to us, or is it even the ancient grains aren't that good for us?
well, before I answer that, can I just go back a step?
Hmm.
It's not just a microbiome, but the concept of the gut as the second brain, I think, is a very important concept because the gut and the brain actually communicate with each other.
Hmm.
And there's so many nerves that connect the brain to the gut and the gut to the brain. So the brain can affect the gut. Um, I suppose before an exam, everybody gets stressed and they have to rush off to the toilet because the gut tells the brain it's stressed. But then the gut can tell the brain what to do and how to feel. So it's a two-way connection between the gut and the brain.
Hmm.
And to answer that, fermentation, again, fermented foods. Again, if we go back to our ancient ancestors, they didn't have fridges, so they couldn't preserve the food. And the only way, or one way of preserving food was with the fermentation. And that has various, let's call them good probiotics in it, the kefirs, the yogurts, the kimchi, the sauerkraut, all that. There is bacteria in that, but they're the good bacteria, which our colons need, not the bad bacteria, which I suppose we can talk about that later, where we get it from. But to answer your question about, sorry, what was the question again?
Ancient grains and modern
Grains.
grains, yeah.
Well, that's a big topic in itself because I suppose from a point of view, if we look at our ancestors, Neolithic or caveman ancestors, they virtually didn't eat that much grain anyway. So grain was relatively a new food to our diet. Most grains contain a protein called gluten, which yes, if you're a celiac, you can't eat it. But if you're not celiac, a lot of people do get tummy aches and feel unwell with gluten. But then there's a portion of the population that eat gluten and have no problems with it. So ancient grains, does it have less gluten? Well, it's actually an interesting study where they looked at ancient grains, modern grains, and they found that the gluten content was probably not much different. So it's not the gluten per se. But when they looked at, the gluten's broken down into little bits, and they found that the modern grains have more of the bad broken down bits than the older grains. Does that make sense to you? The body cannot, human stomach cannot break down gluten totally.
That's right.
It breaks it into short protein chains, and those some protein chains don't do much harm. Some of them have opioid effects. Some of them cause, I suppose, you can absorb it and the body recognises as foreign and makes antibodies against it. So the modern grains seem to have more of the bad bits than the good bits. if we kind of put it that way.
No worries, no worries. Now,
Yeah.
Beata,
That also.
in regard to, sorry for jumping in. I'll just ask you a question, and then you can overrule me as well. The In your family, you may need to actually individually cater the diet to suit each member of the family. Is this something that you take into account with regard to grains or breads or cakes or anything like that?
Well, my advice is if one of the family members is, say, celiac, then I'd say, look, I'll say to mum, you don't have to cook 3 meals for 3 different people. Just put the whole family gluten-free, because it's easier for the mother to make 1 meal and the whole family is gluten-free, because it's just easier. Secondly, if you have celiac in the family and you have some bread for the other members of the family, there could be cross-contamination and the celiac gets affected. So you're probably better off, I suppose, working to the lowest common denominator. And if there is a dairy allergy or gluten allergy or whatever, make the whole family. Because if the genetics are there, okay, the rest of the family may not be celiac, but they probably have some sort of gluten sensitivity. But also, even if you're a normal person, gluten can cause gut problems. Maybe not bad enough that you feel it, but it does affect the gut. So in a way, I think you'd be better off gluten-free.
Absolutely.
Certainly, if you feel unwell on it, don't eat it. If you don't feel any different, eat it with respect to, minimising it or eating less.
Beata,
I
your thoughts?
absolutely agree with you, Doctor, because the whole family needs to definitely follow the same protocol. It's not only easier, but in the long term, it's healthier for them.
Yes.
So I agree with that. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Especially when there is the danger of breaking the brain-gut barrier and the peptides from the undigested food then crossing to the brain and doing the damage there, which some recent research, I believe, shows to be a food allergy or intolerance shows to be a underlying problem in developing Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Would you elaborate on that, Dr. Baratosy?
Parkinson's, I suppose there is a gut connection with Parkinson's, but one of the things that has been shown with Parkinson's is not gluten so much. It's a bacteria called H. pylori, which you may have heard of.
Yes.
A bacteria that is connected with ulcers. 2 Australians won the Nobel Prize in 2006, I believe, for discovering that bacteria cause ulcers, which up till then everybody thought that was pretty silly, and there was stress, of course. But it's found that H. pylori actually is connected with Parkinson's, which is an interesting connection. But even before they discovered H. pylori and Parkinson's, if you go through some of the older medical books, they made the comment that people with Parkinson's developed ulcers sort of 10 years before the Parkinson's started showing. So they knew that there was an ulcer-Parkinson's connection, but they didn't know why. But now this H. pylori is one of them. It does get complicated, but lately every Parkinson's patient I've been testing for H. pylori. As far as Alzheimer's, that's such a multifactorial thing that hard to know whether gluten is one of them. Certainly aluminium is the latest one that is thought to be related to Alzheimer's. But I suppose generally, if there is a stress type situation, eating the wrong foods, the wrong diet is stressful for the body, and the body probably doesn't cope as well. Not eating gluten is just one less stress the body has to deal with. So it's probably a more generalized thing rather than a specific.
We have changed our diet, and our environment changed so radically in the last 30, 40 years. Electromagnetic radiation playing much more into it.
I would extend it and say probably in the last 10,000 years our diet has changed from what we were eating before.
Yes.
With the start of agriculture, that's when they started introducing grains. But as a hunter-gatherer, you virtually had very little grain and very little gluten. You hunted and gathered, not grew crops, which just for convenience. But yeah, last 30, 40, 50 years, it's changed even more. Processed food adds all sorts of things to the food. You don't know what they put in it: sugar, salt, preservatives, colours, flavourings. None of them are good for our bodies.
Could you please tell us what you're adding to your book as for revised edition? What new chapters, what new topics?
Well, I'll talk more specifically about the microbiome.
Yeah.
I think the first book I just said, eat probiotics, it's good for you. But now I've expanded it. I've talked about the gut-brain connection. The gut has the second brain. Then I'll talk about SIBO, which back when I first wrote the book, not much was known about SIBO. Yeah. Do you know what SIBO is?
Yeah.
Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Yeah.
And when you look at the symptoms of it, SIBO, irritable bowel, the symptoms are pretty much the same. So is SIBO irritable bowel, or is it a part of it? The newest studies show that about 70% of irritable bowel is actually a SIBO. So normally the small intestine does not have bacteria, but the SIBO bacteria grows in the small intestine, causing pain and bloating and burping and farting and diarrhea or constipation. So the whole idea is to heal the small intestine.
Yes.
The conventional medicine says, here, take these antibiotics that will kill off the bacteria in your gut, but that's a very much Band-Aid job. It gets more involved than that. Other topics include, I talk about histamines and oxalates, and talk about the low histamine and low oxalate diet. I talk about MTHFR and genetic polymorphisms that affect not just, but actually there's a lot of gut issues with MTHFR. That's the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase gene, which some people have abnormalities of, or variations, shall I say, and that causes effects in their metabolism, whether it's gut or brain or whatever. So that's, what else? They're the main ones. But I've always added a little bit, talked a bit about A1 and A2 milk, and God, it got me thinking now. What else did I write about? That's, then, I corrected some spelling mistakes. I corrected some grammar mistakes. I just rephrased a few of the things. Oh, that's right. I got a big chapter on H. pylori. One of the treatments I believe that's good for the gut is the cannabinoids, which is totally illegal here in Australia at the moment, but it's probably one of the best herbs for gut problems. I'm not talking about getting high on marijuana. I'm talking about the cannabinoid oils, which are great for the gut, great for inflammation. Yeah. That's because the body has an endocannabinoid system. The body makes its own cannabinoids. So why shouldn't we use cannabinoids?
Interesting.
So that gets again, until they start legalizing at least the CBD oil, then I'd be a lot happier, and a lot of other people would be, a lot of patients would be happier too.
It's
Yes,
interesting to
definitely.
listen to you, Dr. Baratosy, and the things that you're talking about, because these are not conventional ways of thinking, and these are actually, if you like, a modern approach in the holistic
Mm,
relationship. And
not, yeah,
I noticed that the clinic, the Gore Street Clinic, is a comprehensive clinic in that it just doesn't present conventional medicine, but a whole variety of disciplines.
yeah. Well, we are an integrative clinic, so we practice integrative medicine, which combines, I suppose, conventional medicine where it's absolutely needed with acupuncture or herbs or nutrients or, well, integrative
Yeah.
clinic.
Yes, that's good.
No worries.
You mentioned A1 and A2 milk. Would you elaborate on that? Because I thought you rather against dairy altogether. So, are we really allowed
That,
and encouraged to eat that lovely yogurt, or is it better to stay off altogether?
well, let's call it a relative thing. If you can get raw, unpasteurized milk in small doses, it's probably good. If you can't get it, most dairy is what we call A1, which actually is
Yeah.
a mutant. Casein in the milk is a different one from A2. It's just when humans metabolize A1, the enzyme cleaves the casein molecule, and resulting peptide has opioid type effects and gets into the brain and spaces you out and gives you constipation, and some people can't tolerate it. Some people who are dairy intolerant can tolerate A2 better than A1. The thing with A1 is it's the big cows are A1, and big
Yeah.
corporations want big profits with lots of milk, so they have big cows to make more milk, but they're all A1.
Yeah.
The A2 are the smaller Jersey and the house cow people used to have in their backyard for fresh milk.
Yeah.
And now, when we talk about yogurt, yogurt has been through a fermentation process, which means it does break down the casein to some extent. So fermented foods are probably safer. I can't remember if we talked about it earlier, but with gluten, if you make bread and just get grain, millet, and then make flour and make a bread out of it, then it's the gluten's still there. But if you do the traditional sourdough fermentation process, there again, you ferment it. Fermentation breaks down gluten to some extent, or maybe a lot of extent. Just like with soya, fermented soya products break down the bad portion of the soya. So fermentation does partially digest or fully digest what we can't fully digest. So that's another good reason for fermenting dairy and grains and soy, because it actually breaks down the molecules that our bodies can't handle.
Yes, yes. What other wonderful tips can you give us as to the diet we eat?
Well, I suppose I'm very much a paleo type person, so I think go back to our ancestral roots and hunter-gatherer type diet. So basically fresh meat, fresh vegetables, minimal grain, dairy, fermented, or if you're going to have milk, obviously if you eat a food and it makes you sick, don't eat it. But if you have a little bit of milk in your coffee every morning and you don't feel unwell, then from a pragmatic point of view, you can have a little bit. Fresh veggies, no tins, no packets, no... you go to your grocer and get some veggies, you go to the butcher, get some meat and cook it from scratch. That's really the basic underlying diet that I tell people. Keep it simple.
Yes, simple becomes very, very complicated those days, because you go to the butcher and the meat will be full of antibiotics and full of hormones of some kind. And can you trust that meat?
Well,
Because it obviously
you don't go
has,
to any butcher. You go to a butcher you know has organic meats, grass-fed meats, which
yes,
living in the wilds of Tasmania, our local butcher is pretty good, and they're all
wow,
um, a lot of them are grass-fed, and living on the farm we have our own meat, so at least the sheep we have we know is organic and grass-fed,
yes, yes,
and the chooks lay are organic eggs, and they're no chemicals, and they're free range. In fact, looking out the window now, I can see them wandering around the backyard,
yeah,
eating grubs and
eating
bugs,
your,
and
mhm,
picking at whatever they can see. I mean, I stand there looking at them, and they look, and they grab at something, and I can't see what they're grabbing, but that's what they eat, and they're healthy. Eggs are healthy. The yolk's really yellow, orange, and very healthy eggs. But then that goes to the fact that the chooks are healthy and they're free range and not caged. And
that's
I
right.
was watching a program about chooks, how commercial chooks, there's what, 10 chooks per square metre or 5 per square metre. And I said to myself, well, we've got 1 chook per acre in our place. So
Yeah.
they just wander around, and at night they all go back to their roost, and we lock them up.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not everybody can live a life like that, but if you can get free-range eggs and free-range chooks and grass-fed meat and fresh-grown vegetables without sprays and not chemical fertilizers, but composted manures, and add trace minerals to the soil, then the veggies you grow are a lot healthier for you.
It sounds to me like it's a comprehensive lifestyle choice, and it's the right choice. I think it's the
It's
right
hard. Well, it
choice.
can be hard work
Yeah.
because people told me I was mad. It's, you're retiring and you're going to a farm to work harder. But no, people spend thousands of dollars on gym membership. We've got our gym outside when we work in the garden.
True, true.
That's excellent.
Um,
Last questions,
could you?
Beata. Thank you.
Oh, last question then. Could you tell us about detoxing a little bit on your own at home? What would you do if you think that you need cleansing? Would you start with a fast? Would you stay away
Well,
from certain foods or?
well, there's 2 ways of looking at it. I have patients coming to me and they want a detox, once a year do a detox. And I say to them, do you take the rubbish out every day into the bin and then get rid of it every week? Do you wipe your feet on the mat before going into the house? Or do you allow your house to get dirty and clean it once a year? I think our body should be the same. Obviously, our whole lifestyle is a detox in a way, because we avoid putting nasties in our body. But if you do feel a bit, well, toxic, sludged, whatever you like to call it, you can use, get your bowels working, get your liver working, detox through the skin with either a scrubbing brush or a sauna if you can do it. But I think if you live a natural lifestyle, then that's all done automatically every day without having to do a specific detox once a year. So it's prevention rather than treatment.
Excellent,
Yes,
excellent,
that's very
excellent.
true.
No worries.
Thank you.
Dr. Baratosy, thank you so much for your time today, and Beata for your telling questions and probing. I really enjoyed it, and I'd love to have you both back on our program at another time. So thank you very much.
That'll be great.
Thank you.
Excellent,
Thank you.
excellent. All
Thank
right. Well,
you.
this is Arnie Luke's at the Crossroads, and I'll just move out the way. This is the backdrop. Is a picture of Dr. Baratosy's. There's 3 books in that. It could still be your thyroid, gut feeling, and there's always an alternative. And there are other books out there that Dr. Baratosy has written. He works at the Gore Street Clinic, Hobart, Tasmania, and he's certainly a find. Make yourself known to him and ask his opinion because it's certainly worth garnishing. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for today. Arnie